I never considered myself a particularly vindictive person until I moved into university housing. Then again, I'd never had a roommate who made it her personal mission to make my life miserable just because of who I loved. Let me back up. I'm 23, and I'd been living in this shared apartment for about 4 months when everything started. The housing situation was pretty standard for international students, for bedrooms branching off a common living area, shared kitchen and bathroom, the works. When I first moved in, there were 3 of us. Myself, a quiet engineering student I'll call the bookworm, and an exchange student from Eastern Europe who was genuinely lovely. We'll call her the cool one, because that's exactly what she was. The 4th room sat empty for a few months, which honestly wasn't the worst thing. 3 people sharing common spaces is infinitely easier than 4. But eventually, someone new was assigned to our unit. That someone was my girlfriend. Now, before you jump to conclusions, no, we didn't orchestrate this. It was pure coincidence that she got assigned to our building, and even more coincidental that a room opened up in my specific unit right when she needed housing. We'd been together for almost 2 years at that point, and the idea of living in the same apartment seemed like a dream come true. We were careful about it though. We talked to both the bookworm and the cool one before my girlfriend even submitted her housing transfer request. The bookworm just shrugged and said she barely left her room anyway, so it made no difference to her. The cool one was actually excited about it, saying it would be nice to have another woman in the apartment since we'd be splitting 2 and 2. There was supposed to be a 4th conversation though. Another student from the same country as the cool one was scheduled to move in around the same time as my girlfriend. We'd exchanged a few pleasantries in passing when she came to view the room, but we'd never actually sat down and talked. I'd messaged her a few times, trying to coordinate a proper introduction, and mentioned that my girlfriend would be moving into the 4th room, but she never responded. I should have seen that as the red flag it was. The language barrier didn't help. See, we're in a country where the primary language has this quirk. The word for close friend and the word for romantic partner are essentially the same in casual conversation. Context usually makes it clear, but if you're not paying close attention or if you're new to the language, it's easy to miss. When I'd mentioned to the new roommate in our brief hallway encounters that my partner was moving in, I used the term that should have been clear, but apparently it wasn't clear enough. Or maybe she just heard what she wanted to hear. My girlfriend moved in on a Saturday. It was a beautiful autumn day, the kind where the air is crisp and the leaves are just starting to turn golden. We spent the morning hauling boxes up 3 flights of stairs because, of course, the elevator was broken. By afternoon, her room was starting to look lived-in, posters on the walls, books on the shelves, her colorful quilt spread across the bed, and on the outside of her bedroom door, right next to her name tag, she hung a small rainbow flag. It wasn't even that big, maybe 6 inches across, but it was vibrant and unmistakable. A little beacon of pride that made me smile every time I walked past it. The bookworm noticed it and gave a thumbs up. The cool one actually hugged my girlfriend and told her she loved it. The 4th roommate said nothing that day. She stayed in her room with the door closed, even though we could hear her moving around inside. The message came the next morning. I was making coffee in the kitchen, still in my pajamas and barely awake, when my phone buzzed. It was from the 4th room, let's call her the problem, and it was the first direct message she'd ever sent me. Despite having lived in the same apartment for weeks, you need to tell your friend to remove that flag from her door. I don't want to see that every time I come out of my room. If she wants to support that kind of thing, she can keep it inside her own space. I read the message 3 times, each time feeling my blood pressure rise a little higher. The audacity of it was almost impressive. She'd been living here for less than a month. My girlfriend had been here for barely 24 hours, and she was already making demands. I showed the message to my girlfriend, who just emerged from her room. Her face fell as she read it, and I watched her unconsciously touch the small rainbow pin on her jacket. Should I take it down? She asked quietly. Absolutely not, I said, probably a bit too forcefully, but let me handle this. I typed out a response, keeping it as diplomatic as possible while making the situation crystal clear. That's not my friend. That's my girlfriend. We're a couple. The flag stays. The response came back almost immediately. What do you mean, girlfriend? I mean, we're dating. Romantically. We're gay. There was a long pause, and I could practically feel the gears turning on the other end of the conversation. Then, this is unacceptable. I can't live like this. I need to move out immediately. Okay, I typed back, my fingers probably hitting the keys harder than necessary. You're welcome to request a transfer. What followed was a series of messages that ranged from barely veiled disgust to outright hostility. She accused us of forcing our lifestyle on her. She claimed she had moral objections to our relationship. She insisted that we were being inconsiderate by flaunting our relationship in a shared space. I showed each message to my girlfriend, whose eyes got progressively shinier with unshed tears. The bookworm, who'd wandered into the kitchen for breakfast, read over my shoulder and let out a low whistle. She's really going for it, huh? The bookworm said. Want me to report this to housing? Not yet, I said, an idea already forming in my mind. Let's see how serious she is about moving out. My girlfriend, ever the peacemaker, took down the flag that afternoon. I hated that she felt she had to, but I understood. She was new to the apartment, new to the building, and didn't want to cause waves. I, on the other hand, had been here for months. I knew the rules. I knew the housing staff. I was absolutely not going to let this slide. Just give me a week, I told my girlfriend. Trust me. The problem made a big show of contacting housing about a transfer, sending screenshots of the messages to the housing office, and claiming she felt uncomfortable in the apartment. But as the days ticked by, it became clear that her sense of urgency was all talk. She wasn't actively apartment hunting. She wasn't asking around about available rooms. She'd file one transfer request, get told there was a waiting list, and then just exist in the apartment, shooting dirty looks at my girlfriend and me whenever we were in the common areas together. A week passed, then 2. The problem seemed to settle settle into a routine of passive-aggressive sighing whenever my girlfriend and I sat together on the couch, ostentatiously cleaning the kitchen after we'd used it as though we were incapable of cleaning up after ourselves. I'm playing music with decidedly pointed lyrics about traditional values at high volume in the mornings. That's when I decided it was time to escalate. Here's the thing about me. I'm a visual arts major with a minor in languages. I'd been studying the language of the problem's home country for almost 2 years at that point, partly because I found it beautiful and partly because one of my closest friends from high school had immigrated from there and had introduced me to all sorts of media from his home country over the years. Old films, specifically. Beautiful, dramatic, emotionally charged films from decades past, full of intense friendships and artistic cinematography and dialogue that walk the line between profound and ridiculous. My friend and I had spent countless hours watching these films together, laughing at the overthought moments and genuinely moved by others. I'd developed quite a few favorite characters from these movies. And I'd even done a few sketch studies of them for art class, but I'd never done shipping art until now. I spent an entire weekend locked in my room with my pencils, sketchbook, and a selection of screenshots from my favorite films. By Sunday evening, I had a portfolio of drawings that I was genuinely proud of from an artistic standpoint. They were good, really good. Detailed character studies showing subtle emotions, careful attention to period-accurate clothing, dynamic compositions that captured the drama of the source material. They also all depicted romantic or romantically suggestive scenarios between male characters. Some were subtle. Two characters sitting close together, one's hand on the other's shoulder, their gazes locked in a moment of intense emotion. Others were less subtle, embraces, almost kisses, tender moments that could only be read one way. And on each drawing, in careful script, using the alphabet of the problem's native language, I'd written quotes from the actual films, lines about loyalty and devotion, and the agony of separation, all taken directly from the movies, but presented in a context that gave them new meaning. On Monday morning, I taped them to my bedroom door. The reaction was everything I'd hoped for, and more. The bookworm saw them first. She stopped dead in the hallway, leaned in to examine them, and then let out a surprised laugh. Are these from Wait? Did you draw these? These are actually really good. Thanks, I said, trying to sound casual while my heart hammered in my chest. I'm a big fan of these films. I can tell. The detail on the uniforms is incredible. She squinted at the text. I can't read this though. What does it say? I translated a few of the quotes, and she laughed again. That's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. The cool one came home from class around noon. I heard her stop in the hallway, and then there was silence. I poked my head out of my room to find her standing there with her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide. Are these? She started, then broke into a huge grin. Are these from those old films? The ones they play on television on holidays? You recognize them? Of course. I grew up watching these. She leaned closer, reading the quotes, and her grin got even wider. Oh, this is genius. This is absolutely genius. We should watch these together sometime. Haven't seen them in years. I'd love that, I said, and I meant it. The problem got home from her evening class around 6. I was in the kitchen making dinner when I heard her footsteps in the hallway suddenly stop. There was a long, long silence. Then I heard her bedroom door slam shut, with enough force to rattle the dishes in the cabinets. My phone buzzed a minute later. Take those disgusting drawings down immediately. I didn't respond. Another message. This is disrespectful. You're doing this just to upset me? Still didn't respond. A third message. If you don't take them down, I'll take them down myself. I walked to my room, took photos of all the drawings for documentation purposes, and then went back to making dinner. My girlfriend came home to find me humming cheerfully while chopping vegetables. You're in a good mood, she said, kissing my cheek. I am, I agreed. Come see what I made. When I showed her the drawings, her eyes went wide. Then she started laughing, really laughing. The kind of full body laughter that made her grab onto the wall for support. You didn't, she gasped. I did. These are amazing. These are actually beautiful. Did you really do all of these this weekend? Every single one. She pulled out her phone and started taking photos. I'm sending these to my sister. She's going to love them. The problem emerged from her room around 8, presumably, to make dinner. I heard her stop in the hallway again, heard what sounded like a frustrated growl, and then heard her bedroom door slam for the second time that evening. This became the pattern for the next week. I'd tape up the drawings in the morning. The problem would glare at them all day, send me increasingly angry messages, and hole up in her room. The bookworm would make appreciative comments about the artistry. The cool one would stop to read the quotes and giggle. And then, exactly 1 week after I'd first put them up, the problem made good on her threat. I'd expected it, honestly. Her messages had been escalating, getting more aggressive and desperate. So, when I heard her door open early one morning, earlier than she usually got up, I was already awake and alert. I heard the sound of paper tearing. By the time I got my door open, she was already halfway down the hall, my drawings clutched in her hands, several of them torn. Her face was flushed with anger, and she didn't even look at me as she stormed past toward the front door of the apartment. I followed her. This was the crucial moment, the one I'd been preparing for. See, I'd learned a lot about university housing policy over the past few months. I knew what was considered acceptable behavior and what wasn't, and I knew that destroying another resident's property, even something as simple as drawings taped to a door, was a serious violation. I'd also taken the precaution, after her initial threat, of making copies of all my drawings and laminating them. The originals were safely tucked away in my closet. What she'd just ripped off my door were the copies, and while I was annoyed about the lamination cost, it was a small price to pay for what was about to happen. As the problem stormed toward the building's trash room, I was right behind her, my phone already out and recording. But I wasn't the only one following her. The cool one had heard the commotion and had emerged from her room. The bookworm, surprisingly alert for 7 in the morning, had poked her head out too. And most importantly, our Rahu happened to be doing morning rounds, had heard the noise, and came to investigate. Hey, the Ra called out, what's going on? The problem spun around, still clutching my torn drawings, and found herself facing an audience of 4 people, one of whom was holding a phone, and another who had literal authority over housing disputes. The problem started, gesturing at me. She put these disgusting things on her door just to upset me. I'm throwing them away. Those are mine, I said calmly. I drew them. They were taped to my personal door, on my personal space. You just tore them down and destroyed them. The Ra's expression shifted from confused to serious. Is that true? Did you remove these from her door? They were inappropriate, the problem insisted. They're fan art of classic films, the cool one interjected. She'd moved closer and was looking at the torn drawings in the problem's hands. I recognize these movies. There's nothing inappropriate about them. Let me see, the RA said, holding out her hand. Reluctantly, the problem handed over the drawings. The Ra examined them, her eyebrows rising slightly. These are really good, she said. What's inappropriate about them? The problem struggled for words. They're 2 men. Together, it's propaganda. It's fan art, I corrected. From films from your own country, actually. Films that are shown on public television. The Ra looked between us, and I could see her putting the pieces together. She'd been briefed on the earlier complaint the problem had filed about my girlfriend and me, and now here was the problem. Destroying another resident's property in a fit of rage that was clearly motivated by the same prejudice. You need to give those back, the RA said firmly. I'm throwing them away. If you destroy another resident's property, that's a housing violation. You need to return them now. For a moment, I thought the problem might actually refuse. Her jaw was clenched, her face was red, and her hands were crumpling the drawings. But then she seemed to realize how many people were watching, how many witnesses there were, and she thrust the torn drawings at me with enough force that I had to step back. This isn't over, she hissed. Actually, the RA said, I think it is. I need you to come with me to the housing office. What I didn't know until later was that this wasn't the problem's first incident. Apparently, she'd been sending hostile messages to my girlfriend, directly messages my girlfriend hadn't told me about because she didn't want to escalate things. She'd also been reported by residents on other floors for making derogatory comments about queer students in common areas. This incident with my drawings was the final straw. The housing office moved fast. By that afternoon, the problem had been officially notified that her housing contract was being terminated due to repeated violations of the community standards policy, specifically the sections on respecting other residents and maintaining a harassment-free environment. She had 2 weeks to find alternative housing. She was gone in 10 days. The morning after she moved out, I woke up to find a small rainbow flag taped to my bedroom door, and another on the bookworm's door, and another on the cool one's door, and one on my girlfriend's door, right next to the original flag she'd put up on her first day. I found the cool one in the kitchen, making coffee. Where did these come from? I asked, gesturing at the flags. She smiled. I ordered them online after I saw what she did to your drawings. I figured we could all use them. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. What she did was wrong. What you did, she gestured toward my room, where I'd already put up a fresh set of drawings, was brave and artistic. And hilarious. The bookworm wandered in, yawning. Are we having a Flagzondor's solidarity moment? Because I'm here for it? Apparently, I said, feeling oddly emotional. My girlfriend emerged last, her eyes red like she'd been crying. Happy crying, I realized, when she pulled me into a tight hug. Thank you, she whispered. I didn't do anything, I said. You did everything. Later that week, the cool one made good on her promise, and we all gathered in the living room to watch the films I'd used as inspiration for my drawings. The bookworm, who'd never seen them before, was immediately hooked. My girlfriend kept pointing out details in the cinematography, and the cool one and I provided running commentary, quoting lines before the characters said them, and laughing at the melodramatic moments we'd watched a dozen times before. It was perfect. At one point, during a particularly intense scene between 2 of the main characters, the bookworm leaned over and whispered, "Okay, I totally see why you drew them like that. There's definitely some tension there. Right?" I whispered back. "It's not just me seeing it." "Oh no, that's fully intentional. Look at the framing of that shot." After the movie ended, we stayed up late talking about film theory and queer coding in historical cinema, and whether the filmmakers had intended the subtext, or if it was a happy accident. Art. It was the kind of conversation I'd dreamed of having in college. The kind of intellectual and creative exchange that made all the stress of university life worth it. As everyone was heading to bed, my girlfriend pulled me aside. "I looked up those films," she said, "wanted to understand what you'd referenced. Did you know that in the original language, some of those quotes you used are even more intense than the translations suggest?" "I did," I said. "That's why I chose them." She laughed. "You're diabolical. I prefer strategically petty." "That works too." The new 4th roommate moved in 3 weeks later. She was a grad student in the literature department, quiet and thoughtful, who immediately complimented my drawings and asked which films they were from. When I told her, her face lit up. "I wrote my undergraduate thesis on queer readings of Eastern European cinema," she said. "These are some of my favorite films. Would you mind if I took photos of your drawings? They'd be perfect examples for a paper I'm working on." I minded exactly 0%. Life settled into a comfortable routine after that. My girlfriend and I could hold hands in the common areas without feeling watched. The rainbow flags stayed on all our doors. I kept adding to my collection of drawings, branching out into other films and characters, experimenting with different art styles and mediums. The cool one and I started a weekly film night tradition that continued for the rest of the year. The bookworm discovered she actually loved analyzing films through a queer lens and ended up changing her minor to film studies. The new roommate became a good friend and a valuable resource when I decided to submit some of my artwork to a university exhibition on reinterpretation of classic media. And sometimes, when I was having a bad day or doubting myself, I'd look at those drawings on my door, the ones that had caused so much chaos and ultimately led to so much good, and I'd remember that standing up for yourself doesn't always have to be loud or aggressive. Sometimes it can be quiet and artistic and a little bit petty. Sometimes it can be exactly what you need it to be. The problem never contacted me again after she moved out, which was fine by me. I heard through the housing grapevine that she'd moved into a single room in a different building and mostly kept to herself. Part of me wondered if the experience had made her reconsider her views, but I knew that wasn't my responsibility. I'd done what I needed to do to protect myself and my girlfriend, and that was enough. What I didn't expect was the ripple effect it would have. A few months later, I was hanging out in the campus LGBT center when a first-year student approached me. She was nervous, twisting her hands together, but she looked determined. "Are you the one who did the film drawings?" she asked. "The ones that got that homophobic student kicked out?" I blinked, surprised. "How did you hear about that?" "It's kind of a legend in the housing community," she said. "Someone told me about it when I was worried about coming out to my roommates. They said if anything went wrong, I should talk to you." "Oh," I said, taken aback. "I mean, I'm happy to talk, but I'm not sure I'm qualified to." "You stood up for yourself," she interrupted. "Using art and humor instead of just getting angry, that takes guts. I just wanted to say thank you. Stories like yours make it easier for people like me." After she left, I sat there for a long time, thinking about what she'd said. I'd never considered myself particularly brave. I'd just been stubborn and petty and unwilling to back down. But maybe that was its own kind of bravery. My girlfriend found me there an hour later, still lost in thought. "You okay?" she asked, sitting down next to me. "Yeah," I said. "Just thinking about how weird life is. How something that started as basically a revenge plot turned into something bigger." "Your revenge plots have always been extra," she said fondly. "Remember when that guy in high school said your art was just doodles and you spent 3 months creating an entire graphic novel just to prove him wrong? That was different." "How?" "That was about artistic pride. This was about not letting bigotry win. And also about artistic pride," she pointed out. "Those drawings were incredible. You put real work into them." "I guess I did." "You know what I love about you?" she said, taking my hand. "You never do anything halfway. When you decide to take a stand, you go all in. Even if your method is drawing gay fan art of Soviet-era films, they're not Soviet-era. I started, then stopped, when I saw her grin. You're messing with me." "Always," she said, kissing my cheek. "But I'm also serious. What you did mattered. Not just for us, but for other people too. That first-year student who talked to you? She's not the only one. People have been talking about it, and it's making a difference." Looking back now, a full year later, I can see that she was right. The drawings are still on my door, though I've added many more since then. They've become something of a landmark in our building. People give directions based on them turn left at the gay film art. Prospective students touring the campus have asked about them. I even got commissioned to do a series for the LGBT Center's annual fundraiser. The problem's attempt to make me hide who I was backfired spectacularly. Instead of shrinking myself to make her comfortable, I expanded, took up more space, made my presence impossible to ignore. And in doing so, I accidentally created something bigger than myself, a symbol of resistance, of creativity, of refusing to be diminished. Would I do it all again? Absolutely, though maybe next time I'd laminate the copies from the start. That really would have saved me some money. But the principle remains. Sometimes the best response to hatred is not matching it with anger, but with art, with humor. With the kind of creative pettiness that leaves your opponent sputtering because they can't quite articulate what you've done wrong, even though they just know that you've outsmarted them completely. And if that makes me petty, well, I'll wear that label proudly, right next to all my rainbow flags and controversial artwork. After all, I've got the drawings to prove it.